Ama Mensa is counting her last bills in a Seoul hostel with 7 days until she is homeless, until a rainstorm and a chance encounter with Park Ji-hoon changes everything. He sees her kindness in sharing an umbrella with a stranger, recognizes her struggle, and offers her a way out. But Ji-hoon is no ordinary CEO. At 24, Ama Mensa balanced the weight of her dreams against the reality of her nearly empty wallet. She sat on the narrow hostel bed in Gangnam, Seoul, methodically counting bills that represented everything she had left in the world. 300,000 won. Maybe $800 if she was lucky with the exchange rate. Her scholarship funding, delayed by administrative complications she still did not fully understand, had left her stranded 6,000 miles from home with a thesis half-finished and a visa that had quietly expired 3 days ago. The host family who had promised her a room had canceled 2 weeks after her arrival, citing vague family emergencies that felt more like polite rejection. She was supposed to be living her dream right now, supposed to be immersed in groundbreaking research on Korean business practices and African market partnerships, supposed to be proving that a girl from Accra could hold her own in international academia, supposed to be making her mother proud. Instead, she was counting down to homelessness in a city where she knew exactly 3 people, none of whom could help. The hostel notice on her door was clear: check out in 6 days, no extensions available. She had done the math 17 times, each calculation yielding the same impossible result. Housing would consume most of her remaining money. Food and transportation would take the rest. Her thesis research required resources she could no longer afford. Her return flight was not for another 4 months, and changing it would cost more than she had. The walls of her tiny room, decorated with cheerful travel posters that now felt like mockery, seemed to press closer each day. Ama stood and walked to the small mirror, studying the face that stared back. Rich brown skin that her grandmother said held the warmth of the African sun. Natural hair pulled into intricate braids she had done herself to save money. Dark eyes that usually sparkled with determination, but now showed the exhaustion of too many sleepless nights spent worrying. She was tall, nearly 5'9", with the athletic build of someone who had grown up playing netball and running everywhere because taxis were expensive. She wore her favorite yellow blouse, slightly faded now, and jeans that had seen better days. The concealer she had carefully applied that morning could not quite hide the shadows under her eyes. Have any of you ever felt completely alone in a foreign country, watching your dreams slip away $1 at a time? Drop your city or state in the comments. Sometimes knowing you are not alone in the struggle makes all the difference. Her phone buzzed. Email from the scholarship office. Funding delayed minimum 4 more weeks due to processing issues. Her heart sank. For weeks might as well be for years. She would be on the street long before that money arrived. Ama grabbed her worn backpack, the one that had traveled with her from Ghana to Korea and showed every mile, and headed out. The university library was free, warm, and had internet. She could at least pretend to work on her thesis, lose herself in research for a few hours, delay the inevitable panic until nightfall. The autumn afternoon in Seoul was crisp, that perfect temperature between summer heat and winter cold that made the city feel alive with possibility. Ama walked through Gangnam streets lined with luxury stores she could not afford to enter, past restaurants where a single meal cost more than her daily budget, surrounded by wealth that highlighted her poverty. She had her small folding umbrella tucked in her bag, the cheap one she had bought at a convenience store, because Seoul weather was unpredictable and she could not afford to get sick. She spent 4 hours in the library, trying to focus on research about corporate expansion strategies and cross-cultural business partnerships, but her mind kept drifting to practical calculations. How long could she stretch $800? Where could she sleep if the hostel forced her out? Should she call her mother and admit failure, beg for money the family did not have, abandon everything she had worked for? By the time she left the library, late afternoon had shifted into early evening. The sky had darkened, heavy clouds rolling in with that particular weight that promised serious rain. Ama walked quickly, hoping to make it back to the hostel before the storm hit. She was 3 blocks from the subway station when the sky opened. It was not gentle rain. It was the kind of sudden, violent downpour that Seoul sometimes produced, sheets of water that soaked through clothing in seconds and turned streets into rivers. Amma ducked under a small awning outside what appeared to be a luxury corporate building, fumbling in her bag for her umbrella. Around her, expensive cars splashed through rapidly forming puddles, their drivers dry and unconcerned. Pedestrians in business attire ran for cover, designer bags held over their heads. That was when she saw him. A man stood about 10 feet away, completely exposed to the deluge, phone pressed to his ear, briefcase held uselessly above his head in a futile attempt at shelter. He was clearly in the middle of an important conversation, speaking rapid Korean that Amma could not follow, his attention completely focused on whatever crisis was unfolding through the phone. The rain plastered his dark hair to his head, soaked through what was obviously an extremely expensive suit, and he did not seem to notice or care. Amma's umbrella was small, barely adequate for one person, but she opened it anyway and stepped out from her sheltered spot. She walked over to the stranger and simply held the umbrella over both of them, saying nothing, just standing there in the rain while he continued his phone conversation. He noticed her immediately. His dark eyes, sharp and calculating even in the storm, flicked to her face with an expression of genuine surprise. He was older than her, late 30s probably, with the kind of angular Korean features that photographs well and an intensity that made the air around him feel heavier. Even soaked and disheveled, he radiated something that made Amma want to step back. Authority, power, danger. But she held the umbrella steady and waited. For 5 minutes they stood together in awkward silence while his driver presumably navigated Seoul traffic. The umbrella was too small to adequately cover both of them. Amma felt rain soaking through her jeans, her cheap canvas shoes filling with water, but she did not move. The stranger finished his call, slipped his phone into his pocket with a smooth, practiced motion, and finally looked at her directly. She noticed everything in that moment of assessment. The suit was custom-tailored, probably cost more than her entire semester's expenses, now ruined by the rain. His watch was elegant and understated in the way that only very expensive watches are, the kind that whisper wealth rather than shout it. His shoes were Italian leather, handmade, completely inappropriate for a rainstorm. His hands were long-fingered and steady, the hands of someone who had never done manual labor but somehow still conveyed strength. His face was all sharp angles and control, high cheekbones, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone, but his eyes were what held her attention. Dark, intelligent, missing absolutely nothing, evaluating her with the same intensity she imagined he brought to corporate negotiations or whatever important business consumed his life. He noticed things about her too, she could tell. The worn backpack with its fraying straps, the faded clothing that had been washed too many times, the tired eyes that probably told him more than she wanted to reveal, the way she shivered slightly in the cold rain despite trying to hide it, the small umbrella that was clearly the cheapest model available, doing its inadequate best to shelter them both. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, so perfectly timed it must have been close by. The car was expensive, the kind with tinted windows and an aura of importance, driven by a professional in a dark suit who looked more like security than a typical driver. The stranger turned to her, water still dripping from his hair, his expression unreadable. "Your name?" he said. His English was perfect, barely accented, the voice of someone educated internationally. "Amma Mensa," she replied, unsure why she was answering. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card from what must have been a waterproof case, because the card emerged completely dry and pristine. The cardstock was heavy, expensive, embossed with simple, elegant lettering. It said only Park Ji-hoon with a phone number below. No title, no company, no explanation. "If you need anything while in Seoul, call this number," he said. Amma stared at the card, confused. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "You helped me first," he responded simply, as if that explained everything. The driver had opened the rear door, waiting patiently. Park Ji-hoon gave her one last look, something almost like curiosity crossing his controlled features, and then he was gone. The sedan pulled away smoothly, disappearing into Seoul traffic, leaving Amma standing in the rain with a soaked umbrella and a business card that felt heavier than it should. She looked at the card for a long moment, then carefully tucked it into her bag's inner pocket where it would stay dry. The rain was already lessening, the sudden storm moving on as quickly as it had arrived. Amma walked to the subway station, her mind spinning with questions. Who was Park Ji-hoon? Why had a wealthy stranger given her his personal number? What did he see when he looked at her that made him offer help? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on immediate problems. 6 days until the hostel forced her out. $800 to her name. A thesis that seemed impossible to finish. A future that looked darker every day. The business card was an odd bright spot in an otherwise grim situation, but she was practical enough to know that strangers did not solve other people's problems out of kindness. There was always a price. When Amma returned to the hostel, wet and exhausted, she found another notice on her door. This one was more direct. Check out in 6 days, no exceptions, room already booked for next guest. She sat on her narrow bed and pulled out her laptop, checking email one more time in case the scholarship office had miraculously resolved their processing issues. Instead, she found a message from her thesis advisor, Professor Kim, asking for an update on her research progress. Amma stared at the email, trying to figure out how to explain that her groundbreaking research had stalled because she was about to become homeless. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally closing the laptop without sending anything. Her phone buzzed again. Text from her mother in Accra. Just checking in, sweetheart. How is Seoul treating you? Sending love. Amma felt tears prick her eyes. Her mother had sacrificed so much to help her get this opportunity, working double shifts at the hospital, saving every sadi possible, beaming with pride when Amma was accepted to the international graduate program. How could she call home and admit she had failed? That all the sacrifice had been for nothing because she could not even keep a roof over her head? She pulled out the business card instead, studying it in the dim light of her hostel room. Park Ji-hoon. Just a name and a number. She Googled the name on her phone and found dozens of results. Park Ji-hoon, CEO of Park Industries. Park Ji-hoon at charity galas and corporate events. Park Ji-hoon in business journals and financial news. The man she had shared an umbrella with was apparently one of Seoul's most powerful executives, running a tech empire worth billions, which made his personal interest in a broke graduate student even stranger. Amma put the card on her small bedside table and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she would visit campus housing office, beg for emergency accommodation, maybe find someone looking for a roommate. She would figure something out. She always did. The business card caught the light from the street outside, elegant and mysterious, and probably meaningless. She did not know that Park Ji-hoon was, at that exact moment, sitting in his penthouse office 74 floors above Seoul, looking at security footage of the street where they had met, replaying the moment a stranger with kind eyes had shared her umbrella expecting nothing in return. She did not know he had already instructed his security chief to run a background check, to find out everything about Amma Mensa. She did not know that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of a man who controlled not just boardrooms but shadows, who protected what was his with ruthless efficiency, who had spent 3 years building walls around his heart after losing his brother. She did not know that sharing an umbrella in the rain was about to change absolutely everything. 3 days passed before Amma heard from Park Ji-hoon again, though she did not know he had been watching from the moment she walked away from that rainstorm. In his penthouse office that overlooked Seoul like a kingdom waiting to be ruled, Ji-hoon sat across from his security chief, a former military intelligence officer named Choi who asked no questions and delivered only facts. The report on Amma Mensa lay open on the desk between them, a thin folder that somehow contained everything about a life lived honestly. She is exactly who she appears to be, Choi said in Korean, his tone respectful. Graduate student, excellent academic record, scholarship recipient. Parents are both professionals in Accra. No criminal history, no suspicious associations, no red flags whatsoever. Ji-hoon flipped through the pages. Visa status, Choi prompted. Expired 3 days ago. Student visa extension was supposed to be automatic with scholarship renewal, but the scholarship money was delayed due to administrative issues at her home university. She has not reported the expiration, which makes her vulnerable. Housing situation, Ji-hoon asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Hostel in Gangnam. Checkout required in 3 days. No alternative arrangements visible. Bank account shows approximately $800 remaining. At current spending rate, she has perhaps 1 week of survival funds. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked at the photograph clipped to the file. It was from her university ID, showing a young woman with bright eyes and a genuine smile, someone who had not yet learned to hide hope behind walls. The same woman who had shared her cheap umbrella with a stranger in expensive shoes, expecting nothing in return. Additional concerns, Choi continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. 3 foreign students have disappeared from our hostel area in the past 2 months. We believe it is the work of the same trafficking syndicate that has been expanding operations in Gangnam. They target isolated international students, particularly women, particularly those with expired documentation who cannot safely report to authorities. Ji-hoon's eyes went cold. Is she being watched? We have observed surveillance on the hostel. 2 operatives we recognize from previous syndicate activity. They have not approached her directly yet, but the pattern suggests they are evaluating targets and timing. Something dark and protective unfurled in Ji-hoon's chest, the same feeling that had driven him to build his empire after losing Minjun. The feeling that said some people were worth protecting, worth shielding from a world that saw kindness as weakness and vulnerability as opportunity. He had failed his brother. He would not fail this woman who had shown him a moment of simple, unexpected grace. Increase surveillance, Ji-hoon ordered. I want to know everyone who looks at her, and have a team ready for immediate extraction if needed. Choi nodded, unsurprised. The security chief had worked for Park Ji-hoon long enough to recognize when his employer had decided someone fell under his protection. It was absolute and uncompromising, the kind of protection that eliminated threats permanently. That was Tuesday evening. By Wednesday afternoon, Ji-hoon's precautions proved necessary. Alma had spent the morning at the university library again, losing herself in research because it was easier than confronting her shrinking options. She had 3 days until the hostel forced her out, no responses from her desperate housing inquiries, and a scholarship office that continued to cite processing delays. Her thesis advisor had been understanding but concerned when she finally admitted her situation. Professor Kim had promised to inquire about emergency student housing, but Alma knew those resources were limited and already oversubscribed. She left the library at 4 in the afternoon, backpack heavy with borrowed books she hoped to finish before she lost access to a stable address. The walk back to her hostel normally took 20 minutes through busy Gangnam streets where she could blend into crowds of students and young professionals. Today, she noticed them after the first 10 minutes. 2 men, walking parallel to her route, but maintaining distance. When she turned a corner, they turned. When she stopped to check her phone, pretending to read a message, they stopped as well and made a show of looking at a shop window. They were not particularly subtle, which somehow made it worse. They did not care if she noticed. They wanted her to feel watched, wanted fear to make her vulnerable. Alma's heart began to hammer against her ribs. She picked up her pace, weaving through pedestrians, taking a different route that added blocks to her journey. The men followed. She ducked into a convenience store, hands shaking as she pretended to browse refrigerated drinks while watching the front windows. The men waited outside, not even bothering to hide now. One of them pulled out his phone, made a call, eyes locked on the store entrance. Terror tasted like copper on her tongue. She thought of the warnings she had heard about foreign students disappearing, stories she had dismissed as urban legends meant to scare naive travelers. Those stories were real. Those men outside were real. And she was completely, utterly alone. Her hand fumbled in her bag, searching for her phone. Her fingers found the business card first, that heavy, expensive cardstock with just a name and number. She had kept it, though she could not have said why. Insurance, maybe. Or foolish hope that kindness from a stranger might mean something. Alma pulled out her phone and dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang once. Park Ji-hoon. The voice answered immediately, crisp and alert as if he had been waiting for her call. This is Alma Mensa, she said, trying to keep her voice steady and failing. We shared an umbrella last week. I remember, he said, and something in his tone shifted, became sharper. Where are you? There are men following me, Alma whispered, glancing at the store entrance. 2 of them. I am in a convenience store on Bonjunsa Road, near the station. I think they are waiting for me to come out. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds, but she could feel the intensity through the phone, could sense decisions being made at computational speed. Don't move, Ji-hoon said, his voice absolutely commanding now. Don't go outside. I am sending someone. They will be there in 8 minutes. Stay on the phone with me. Who are these men? She asked, though part of her already knew. People who traffic foreign students, he said flatly. People who saw that you were isolated, vulnerable, and assumed you had no protection. They were wrong. Amma felt tears prick her eyes. How do you know this? I have resources, he replied. And I have been keeping an eye on your situation. You helped me in the rain, Miss Mensah. That created an obligation. 7 minutes later, exactly as promised, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of the convenience store. The driver who emerged was the same professional she had seen during the rainstorm, but now she noticed other details. The way he moved with military precision. The subtle bulge under his jacket that suggested he was armed. The cold assessment in his eyes as he scanned the street and located the 2 men who had been following her. Miss Mensah, he said as he entered the store, his voice polite but absolutely certain. Mr. Park is waiting. Please come with me. Amma looked at the 2 men still visible through the windows. They had noticed the sedan, noticed the driver, and something in their posture had changed. They looked uncertain now, wary, like predators who had suddenly realized their prey had teeth. You are safe now, the driver said quietly, following her gaze. Those men work for people who understand exactly what it means when Park Ji-hoon extends his protection. They will not approach this vehicle. They will not approach you again. She grabbed her backpack and followed him outside. The 2 men faded back into the crowd as she walked to the sedan, melting away like shadows at sunrise. The driver opened the rear door and waited until she was settled before closing it with a solid, secure sound. The car's interior was quiet luxury, leather and technology, and the faint scent of expensive cologne. They drove in silence through Seoul traffic, heading away from her hostel and toward the gleaming towers of the financial district. Amma watched the city slide past, her heart still racing, trying to process what had just happened. She had called a stranger for help, and he had responded immediately, had somehow known she was in danger before she did, had sent protection that made predators retreat. Who was Park Ji-hoon, really? The sedan pulled up to a building she recognized from her earlier research. Park Industries headquarters, 74 floors of glass and steel that dominated the skyline like a declaration of power. The driver escorted her through a private entrance, past security that straightened noticeably at their approach, into an elevator that required a special key card to access the top floors. The penthouse office was exactly what she should have expected and somehow still took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul in every direction, the city sprawling below like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. The decor was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and carefully chosen pieces that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. A massive desk sat near the windows, its surface nearly empty except for a sleek computer monitor and a single folder. Park Ji-hoon stood by the windows, backlit by the late afternoon sun, wearing another impeccable suit and the same controlled intensity she remembered from the rainstorm. When he turned to face her, his expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something dark and dangerous. Sit, he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. Not a request. Amma sat. Her legs felt shaky, adrenaline still coursing through her system. Ji-hoon moved to his desk, opened the folder, and studied its contents for a moment before looking at her directly. Those men who followed you work for an international trafficking syndicate that targets foreign students in Seoul. They have been watching you for at least a week, possibly longer. They identified you as a high-value target because you are isolated, your visa is expired, and you have no local support network. How do you know all of this? Amma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I have extensive resources and connections throughout Seoul, he replied. When I learned about your situation, I had my security team investigate potential threats. The syndicate has been expanding operations in Gangnam for months. You fit their target profile exactly. The words hit her like physical blows. She had known she was vulnerable, but hearing it stated so clinically made the danger real in a way that hollowed out her stomach. What happens now? She asked. Ji-hoon leaned forward, his dark eyes intense and unwavering. Now, I make you untouchable. He opened a drawer and pulled out a document, sliding it across the desk to her. It was a formal contract, multiple pages, professionally formatted with legal language that looked binding and serious. I am expanding Park Industries into African markets, he said, his tone shifting into something that reminded her he was first and foremost a businessman. I need a cultural liaison, someone with authentic understanding of West African business practices, academic credentials, and language skills. Someone who can provide genuine perspective on cross-cultural partnerships and help me avoid the mistakes most Korean companies make when entering those markets. Amma stared at the contract, her mind struggling to keep up. You would live on my estate in a private suite, Ji-hoon continued, his voice measured and precise. You would accompany me to relevant business functions and meetings. You would provide consultation on African market strategies and cultural considerations. You would complete your thesis research with full access to Park Industries' resources and data. He paused, making sure she was following. The salary is $150,000 per year, he stated. Full funding for thesis completion and academic expenses. Legal visa sponsorship through Park Industries. Security detail for your protection. Health insurance and housing included. Amma felt like she could not breathe. This is insane, she whispered. Why would you do this for someone you met once in the ring? Ji-hoon's expression remained controlled, but something flickered in his eyes. Consider it an investment, he said. You have skills and knowledge I need for legitimate business expansion. Your academic background in Korean business practices combined with your African perspective is genuinely valuable. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Also, he added quietly, those men will not touch anyone under my protection. In Seoul, when I claim someone as mine, that claim is respected absolutely. Or there are consequences. The way he said consequences made Amma shiver. This was not just a CEO making a job offer. This was someone who operated in shadows as well as boardrooms, someone whose protection came with the implicit threat of violence against anyone who challenged it. What do you really want from me? Amma asked, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Ji-hoon turned to face her, his expression serious. Honesty, loyalty, your genuine expertise when I need cultural guidance. Your presence at functions where African partnerships are being discussed. Nothing inappropriate, he added, seeing her expression. You will have complete privacy, separate quarters, all professional boundaries maintained. This is a legitimate position, Miss Mensah. I simply require you to accept it. Amma looked at the contract again, reading through the terms. Everything he had promised was clearly stated. Salary, housing, responsibilities, benefits. It was real. It was also completely overwhelming. And if I refuse, she asked quietly, then you return to your hostel, he said with no particular emotion. You have 3 days until you lose housing. Your scholarship funding remains delayed. Your visa remains expired. You remain vulnerable to the people who were following you today, though I will ensure they do not approach you again. You make your own way, as you have been doing. I respect independence, Miss Mensah. I am simply offering an alternative. The choice was not really a choice at all, and they both knew it. She could cling to her pride and end up homeless, in danger, watching her thesis and her dreams crumble. Or she could accept help from a powerful stranger who saw value in what she offered, even if the power dynamic made her uncomfortable. Amma thought of her mother working double shifts in Accra, of Professor Kim, who had believed in her research, of the years of work that had brought her to Seoul and the opportunity that was slipping through her fingers like water. She thought of the men who had followed her with predatory intent, of the fear that had gripped her throat in that convenience store. She thought of Park Ji-hoon responding to her call in seconds, sending help without hesitation, offering protection that made dangerous men retreat. If I accept, she said slowly, I complete my thesis with integrity. No shortcuts, no false credentials, no academic dishonesty. My work has to be mine. Agreed, Ji-hoon said immediately. I need your authentic expertise, not manufactured credentials. Your thesis research will have my full support, but the work and conclusions must be entirely yours. And the professional boundaries you mentioned, Amma continued. They are real. This is employment, not anything else. Completely real, he confirmed. You are an employee with valuable skills. I am an employer with resources to offer. The relationship is professional. Amma's hand trembled as she picked up the pen that sat next to the contract. She was about to sign away her independence, to place herself under the protection and control of a man she barely knew. But she was also signing a path to safety, to completing her thesis, to having resources she desperately needed. Where do I sign? She asked, her voice quiet but clear. Ji-hoon moved to stand beside the desk, pointing to signature lines on multiple pages. As Amma signed her name on each one, she felt the weight of the choice settling over her like a cloak. Security, opportunity, obligation, all wrapped together in expensive cardstock and legally binding language. When the final signature was complete, Ji-hoon gathered the contract and locked it in his desk. "Welcome to Park Industries, Miss Minsa," he said, and for the first time since she had entered his office, something almost like satisfaction crossed his features. "Your accommodations will be ready within 2 hours. My driver will collect your belongings from the hostel and bring you to the estate this evening." "This evening," Amma repeated, feeling overwhelmed. "No reason to delay," he said. "The threat against you is immediate. The sooner you are established under my protection, the safer you will be." He pulled out his phone and made a brief call in Korean. When he finished, he looked at her with those dark, assessing eyes. "One more thing," he said. "You can call me Ji-hoon. We will be working closely. Formality serves no purpose between colleagues. Only if you call me Amma," she countered, finding her voice again. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his controlled features. "Agreed, Amma." She stood on shaking legs, her entire life having shifted in the space of 30 minutes. "Have I made a terrible mistake?" she asked quietly. Ji-hoon considered the question seriously. "You have made a practical choice given impossible circumstances," he said finally. "Whether it is a mistake depends on what you do with the opportunity. I believe you will do something worthwhile." As his driver escorted her back to the elevator, Amma looked back once to see Ji-hoon standing by his windows again, a silhouette of controlled power against the Seoul skyline. She had just placed herself under the protection of a man who moved through shadows and boardrooms with equal facility, who saw her vulnerability and offered salvation wrapped in employment terms. She did not know yet that Ji-hoon had already ordered his security team to completely dismantle the trafficking operation that had targeted her. She did not know that by morning, the syndicate's Seoul leadership would receive very clear warnings about what happened to people who threatened Park Ji-hoon's interests. She did not know that the man who had offered her a job was already thinking of her as something more valuable than an employee. All she knew was that 3 days ago she had shared an umbrella with a stranger. Now she had signed a contract that changed everything. The Park estate was not a house. It was a statement of power disguised as architecture. Amma pressed her face closer to the sedan's tinted window as they drove through Gangnam Hills, leaving behind the dense urban sprawl for tree-lined streets where wealth whispered instead of shouted. The car turned onto a private road, approached a gate that looked more suitable for a military installation than a residence, and stopped while security verified their credentials. The gate opened smoothly, revealing a long driveway that curved through manicured gardens before reaching the main residence. The estate sat on what had to be at least 2 acres of premium Seoul real estate, surrounded by high walls that managed to look elegant while clearly serving a defensive purpose. The main building was a masterpiece of modern Korean architecture, all clean lines and expansive glass, a perfect blend of traditional elements and contemporary luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the evening sky. Perfectly maintained gardens surrounded the structure with careful precision. Everything about the place radiated control, wealth, and absolute security. Ji-hoon's driver pulled up to the main entrance where staff waited with professional courtesy. A woman in her 50s, dressed in elegant traditional Korean attire, stepped forward as Amma emerged from the car. "Miss Minsa, welcome," the woman said in careful English. "I am Mrs. Sung, the estate manager. Mr. Park has instructed me to show you to your quarters and ensure you have everything you need." Amma followed her through the entrance, trying not to gape at the interior. The foyer alone was larger than her entire hostel room, with soaring ceilings, minimalist decor that somehow managed to feel warm rather than cold, and art that she suspected was original and priceless. Everything was pristine, carefully chosen, speaking of wealth that did not need to prove itself. "Your suite is in the East Wing," Mrs. Sung explained as they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. "Mr. Park wanted to ensure you had privacy and space for your academic work." They stopped at a set of double doors that Mrs. Sung opened to reveal what could only be described as a luxury apartment. Amma stepped inside and felt her breath catch. The suite included a bedroom with a king-sized bed and more floor space than seemed necessary, An in-soot bathroom that looked like something from a high-end hotel, a sitting area with comfortable furniture and entertainment system, and most importantly, a dedicated office space with a large desk, ergonomic chair, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows overlooking the gardens. The closet has been stocked with appropriate attire for business functions, Mrs. Sung said, opening doors to reveal clothing that looked expensive and exactly Alma's size. Mr. Park had your measurements from security records and took the liberty of providing a professional wardrobe. If anything does not fit or suit your taste, please let me know and we will arrange alternatives. Alma stared at the closet full of designer suits, elegant dresses, and business casual attire that probably cost more than her entire previous wardrobe combined. This is too much, she said quietly. Mr. Park was very clear about his expectations. Mrs. Sung replied with a small smile. You represent Park Industries now. Your appearance reflects on the company. Consider it a uniform requirement rather than a gift. Alma walked to the windows, looking out over gardens that were lit by subtle landscape lighting as evening deepened into night. Beyond the walls, Seoul sprawled in the distance, a sea of lights that felt very far away from this carefully controlled sanctuary. She was safe here, protected, and completely dependent on a man she barely knew. Dinner will be served at 7:30, Mrs. Sung said. Mr. Park requests your presence in the dining room. I will return at 7:15 to escort you. In the meantime, please make yourself comfortable. Your belongings from the hostel have been placed in the bedroom closet. When Mrs. Sung left, Alma sank onto the bed and tried to process the past 6 hours. This morning she had been counting her last dollars in a cramped hostel. Now she was sitting in luxury that seemed unreal, employed by a billionaire who commanded security teams and made trafficking syndicates retreat, living in a suite that was nicer than anywhere she had ever stayed. She opened her laptop and sent a quick email to her mother. Found housing and employment opportunity with Korean tech company. Everything is fine. We'll call this weekend with details. Love you. It was not entirely a lie. Park Industries was a legitimate tech company. Ji-hoon had offered employment, not rescue, even if both of them knew the real reason for the arrangement. But Alma could not bring herself to explain the full truth yet, could not admit how close she had come to disaster or how completely she had placed herself under a stranger's protection. At 7:15, Mrs. Sung returned to escort her to dinner. Alma had changed into one of the provided outfits, a simple but elegant dress that fit perfectly and made her feel both sophisticated and slightly like she was playing dress-up. She followed the estate manager through corridors and down a curved staircase to the formal dining room. The room was beautiful in an understated way, dominated by a long table that could easily seat 20 but was currently set for 2, one place at the head and one to the right. Tall windows looked out over illuminated gardens. Subtle Korean art decorated the walls. Everything was perfect, controlled, and slightly intimidating. Ji-hoon stood by the windows, changed from his business suit into more casual attire that somehow still managed to look expensive and tailored. Dark slacks, crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows revealing surprisingly muscular forearms, no tie. He turned when she entered, his dark eyes assessing her appearance with the same intensity he brought to everything. The dress suits you, he said simply. Please sit. Alma took the seat to his right as staff began serving dinner. The meal was extraordinary, a careful blend of traditional Korean dishes and what she slowly realized were Ghanaian-inspired preparations. Jollof rice that tasted almost like her mother's recipe. Grilled fish with pepper sauce that had the right amount of heat. Alongside beautifully prepared Korean banchan and expertly cooked meats. You researched my background, Alma observed, tasting the jollof rice and fighting back unexpected emotion at the familiar flavors. I research all my investments, Ji-hoon responded, his tone neutral as he served himself from the various dishes. Alma set down her fork with perhaps more force than necessary. I am not property, Mr. Park. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised slightly. No, you are an employee with valuable skills. There is a difference. I did not mean to offend. I simply meant that when I commit resources to anything, I ensure I understand all relevant factors. They ate in tense silence for several minutes. The food was delicious, but Alma barely tasted it. Too aware of the power dynamic, the strangeness of sitting in a billionaire's dining room, the cage she had chosen even if it was gilded and came with excellent meals. You can call me Ji-hoon, he said suddenly. We will be working closely. Formality serves no purpose between colleagues. Only if you call me Amma, she countered, finding her courage again. Colleagues should be on equal footing, even if we both know this relationship is anything but equal. Something that might have been respect flickered across his controlled features. Agreed, Amma. The rest of the meal passed with less tension. Ji-hoon asked about her thesis research, listened attentively as she explained her focus on cross-cultural business practices and the challenges Korean companies faced when entering African markets. He asked intelligent questions, challenged some of her assumptions, and she found herself engaging with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. Your research could save my company significant money and cultural missteps, he said over coffee that staff served with perfect timing. I was not exaggerating when I said you have valuable expertise. Over the next 2 weeks, Amma began to understand the reality of Park Ji-hoon's world, and it was more complex than she had imagined. Her days developed a rhythm. She woke at 6 to find breakfast already prepared, ate while reviewing news and research, then spent mornings working on her thesis in her private office with access to Park Industries' databases and resources that made her previous research look primitive. Afternoons were spent shadowing Ji-hoon, attending meetings, observing how he navigated corporate negotiations with controlled precision. She watched him in boardrooms, saw how executives straightened when he entered, noticed the deference people showed that went beyond normal professional respect. It was based on something deeper than his position. Fear, maybe, or recognition of power that extended beyond balance sheets and quarterly reports. She noticed other things too. The way his security detail was always present but never obvious. The careful screening of everyone who entered the estate. The subtle way staff avoided certain topics or conversations when she was present. The phone calls Ji-hoon took in rapid Korean, stepping away with an expression that made her glad she could not understand the content. At a charity gala in Gangnam, Amma stood beside Ji-hoon as he worked the room with perfect courtesy. He introduced her as his cultural liaison for African market expansion, and people accepted the explanation without question. But she saw the looks, the careful assessment of what her presence meant, the way Seoul's elite tried to determine her exact relationship to Park Ji-hoon, and what advantages or dangers that might present. A businessman approached them, smile too wide, handshake too familiar. This must be the famous Miss Mensa, he said in accented English. I hear you will be advising on the West African expansion. Miss Mensa brings valuable expertise, Ji-hoon replied smoothly, his hand moving to rest lightly on Amma's back in a gesture that could be interpreted as either professional courtesy or subtle possessiveness. I would love to discuss the project with her, the man continued. Perhaps over lunch sometime. I have connections in Nigeria that might prove useful. Ji-hoon's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. All communications regarding the African expansion go through my office, he said quietly. Miss Mensa's time is fully allocated. But thank you for your interest. The man retreated quickly, and Amma caught the flash of fear in his eyes as he backed away. Who was that? She asked when they were alone. A competitor who likes to gather information through unofficial channels, Ji-hoon replied. He would have tried to pump you for confidential details and use them to undercut our market position. How did you know that? His eyes met hers with dark amusement. Because I have done the same thing to him in the past. On the drive home that night, Amma stared out the window at Seoul lights blurring past. Who are you really? She asked quietly. A man who built an empire from nothing and protects what is his, Ji-hoon answered, his voice matter of fact. And what am I? She pressed. Really, not the employee fiction. What do you actually see when you look at me? He was quiet for a long moment. Someone who shared her umbrella with a stranger in the rain, he said finally. Someone who does the right thing without calculating advantage. That is rare enough to be worth protecting. 2 weeks into her residence at the estate, the test came. Amma was working in her office, reviewing financial projections for the African expansion, when Mrs. Sung knocked and entered with an envelope. This was delivered for you at the gate, the estate manager said, her expression carefully neutral. Security cleared it, but Mr. Park has not been informed yet. I thought you should see it first. The envelope was expensive, heavy cream cardstock, and contained a simple note typed on quality paper. $10,000 in exchange for advance notice of Park Industries' African expansion timeline and target markets. Cash delivery, completely confidential. No one needs to know. There was also a business card for the man who had approached her at the gala. The competitor with too many questions. Amma stared at the note for exactly 15 seconds. Then she stood, grabbed the envelope, and walked directly to Ji-hoon's private office in the main house. She found him reviewing contracts, his reading glasses making him look slightly less intimidating, but no less focused. He looked up when she entered without knocking. "Someone tried to buy information from me," Amma said without preamble, placing the envelope on his immaculate desk. Ji-hoon removed his glasses slowly, picked up the envelope, and read the contents. His expression went absolutely cold, the kind of cold that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. "Who?" he asked, his voice quiet and dangerous. She named the competitor from the gala. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," Amma said, meeting his eyes directly. "I brought this straight to you. I do not sell my integrity for any price, and if he approaches me again, you will hear about it immediately." Ji-hoon studied her face for a long, measuring moment. Then something shifted in his expression. "You passed," he said. "Passed what?" Amma asked, confusion and then anger dawning. "Wait, this was a test?" "That competitor has been leaking information to rivals for months," Ji-hoon explained calmly. "I needed to verify whether you were part of his network or could be compromised. Now I know you cannot. You used me," Amma accused, her voice sharp with betrayal. "I verified your character," he corrected. "There is a difference. Trust is earned through action, not assumed through contract. You just proved you can be trusted with sensitive information. And if I had taken the money," she demanded, "then you would have received it," he said simply. "And I would have known exactly what kind of employee I had hired. As it is, I now know you are exactly what you appeared to be. Someone with integrity." Amma wanted to storm out, to rage at being tested like some sort of experiment. But she also understood his logic. In his world, trust was currency and verification was survival. He could not afford to assume her honesty. He had to know. "That competitor," she said instead. "What happens to him now?" "He will be removed from all future dealings with Park Industries," Ji-hoon replied, already making notes on his computer. "His attempt to bribe an employee will also be shared with certain business partners who value loyalty. By tomorrow, his reputation will reflect his methods." "You are ruthless," Amma observed. "I am practical," he corrected. "And I protect my people." "You are my people now, Amma. Anyone who tries to compromise you answers to me." Despite her anger at being tested, something warm unfurled in Amma's chest at the possessive protectiveness in his voice. Over the following week, she noticed changes. Ji-hoon started actually consulting her on business decisions, not just having her present for appearances. Her insights on West African market dynamics proved genuinely valuable. She challenged his assumptions about consumer behavior, offered perspectives his usual advisors missed because they saw African markets through Korean business lens. He listened, really listened, and implemented her suggestions. Small moments of comfort accumulated. He remembered she preferred tea to coffee in the mornings. He noticed when she was tired from late-night thesis work and shortened their meeting schedule the next day. He asked about her family in Accra with what seemed like genuine interest. He spoke to the cleaning staff and gardeners with the same respect he showed company executives. She observed unexpected kindness. Anonymous donations to organizations supporting trafficking victims. The way he quietly arranged for his driver to help an elderly neighbor with transportation to medical appointments. Late-night phone calls to his mother, where his voice softened into warmth she rarely heard otherwise. One evening, they were working late in his study, reviewing contracts for potential partnerships in Ghana. Amma looked up from her laptop to find Ji-hoon watching her with an unreadable expression. "What?" she asked. "You do not act afraid of me," he observed. "Should I be?" she countered. "Most people are." "I am not most people," Amma said simply. "You have been nothing but professional and respectful. Controlling, yes. Intense, absolutely. But not threatening. Not to me." "No," he agreed quietly, something flickering in his dark eyes. "Never to you." The tension between them shifted, became something neither of them acknowledged, but both felt. The careful distance they maintained suddenly seemed deliberate rather than natural. Late one night, Amma could not sleep. Her mind spun with thesis revisions and cultural observations and the strangeness of her new life. She wrapped herself in a robe and wandered out to the estate terrace, needing air and space to think. She found Ji-hoon already there, standing at the railing, staring out at soul lights that spread below the hills like fallen stars. He wore casual clothes, unusual for him, just dark pants and a thin sweater. He looked younger somehow, less controlled, almost vulnerable. "Cannot sleep either," he said without turning, somehow knowing she was there. "Too much on my mind," Amo admitted, moving to stand beside him at the railing. I come here when I need to think," he said. "When the weight of everything gets too heavy." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the city breathe and glow in the darkness. "Can I ask you something personal?" Amma said finally. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why do you really care this much?" she asked, turning to look at his profile. "You could have assigned bodyguards and stayed distant. You could have hired any consultant for the African expansion. Why are you personally involved in my safety, my work, my life?" Jihoon was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and heavy with old grief. "I had a younger brother, Minjun. He was brilliant, kind, everything good in a world that is mostly dark. He wanted to study music, to create beauty. I was building park industries, consumed with expansion and profit and power. I did not pay attention. I did not notice when a rival syndicate started targeting him to get to me." His hands gripped the railing, knuckles white. "By the time I realized the danger, it was too late. They killed him, used his death to send me a message about respecting territories and understanding consequences. He was 22 years old. Your age. Far from home in his case, meant studying in Europe while I built my empire here. Vulnerable, because I was too focused on money and power to notice he needed protection." Amma felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "His death taught me that power without purpose is just a void," Jihoon continued. "That all the money and influence in the world means nothing if you cannot protect the people who matter. I rebuilt myself after losing him. Made sure I would never be caught unprepared again. Made sure anyone under my protection would have all my resources at their disposal." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes dark with old pain and new intensity. "When I saw you in that rain, offering your umbrella to a stranger expecting nothing in return, it reminded me that some people are worth protecting. When I learned you were in danger, isolated and vulnerable like Minjun was, I could not walk away. I will not fail again." Amma reached out without thinking, placed her hand over his on the railing. "You did not fail your brother," she said softly. "You were building something important. You could not have known." "I should have known," he said. "I should have been watching. Now I watch everything. Everyone under my protection is monitored, guarded, kept safe. It is obsessive. It is excessive. But it means I sleep at night knowing I did everything possible." "Is that why you had me investigated before I even called you?" Amma asked gently. "Yes. The moment you gave me your umbrella, I wanted to know who you were. When the background check revealed your situation and the danger surrounding you, I could not unsee it. Could not walk away from someone who needed protection and showed me kindness." They stood together in the darkness, hands touching, souls spread below them like a kingdom that belonged to the man beside her. "Thank you for telling me," Amma said. "I understand now. This is not just about business or obligation. This is about you trying to save someone because you could not save him." "Partly," Jihoon admitted. "But also because you are genuinely worth protecting, Amma. You have intelligence, integrity, courage. You deserve the chance to complete your thesis and build your career. You deserve safety and resources. I can provide those things. So I do." The moment stretched between them, heavy with things neither could quite say. Then Jihoon stepped back, breaking the contact, rebuilding the professional distance. "You should sleep," he said. "We have meetings tomorrow." Amma nodded and turned to go. At the terrace door, she looked back to find him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Jihoon," she said softly, "for what it is worth, I think Minjun would be proud of who you became, of how you turned grief into protection for others." His control cracked for just a moment, raw emotion crossing his features before he mastered it again. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." Amma went back to her suite and lay awake for a long time, thinking about a powerful man haunted by failure, about a brother who died too young, about the complicated mathematics of protection and obligation, and something that was starting to feel dangerously like trust. Amma had been living on the estate for 2 months when the warning signs began. She had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. If normal could include living in luxury while employed by a billionaire with connections to Seoul's underground networks. Her thesis was progressing beautifully with access to Park Industries data that made her research genuinely groundbreaking. She had become a valuable asset to Ji-hoon's African expansion plans, her insights saving the company from cultural missteps that would have cost millions. And she had started to feel something she had not experienced since arriving in Seoul. Safe. That was when things started to go wrong. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as coincidence. The barista at her favorite coffee shop near the university, the one she visited twice a week when Ji-hoon allowed her off the estate for library research, started asking odd questions. Where do you live now, Alma? I notice you always have a driver. Must be a good job. Do you have a regular schedule for your visits? A car she did not recognize appeared in 3 different locations over the course of a week. Nothing dramatic, just a dark sedan that seemed to show up in her peripheral vision more often than random chance would suggest. Once outside the library, once near a restaurant where she met with her thesis advisor, once idling across from the estate gates when she returned from an errand. The feeling of being watched, that prickling awareness at the back of her neck that made her turn around expecting to find someone staring. Usually finding nothing. Sometimes catching a glimpse of someone who looked away too quickly. Alma mentioned it to Ji-hoon over breakfast one morning. He was reviewing reports on his tablet, already dressed in one of his impeccable suits, his controlled morning routine as precise as everything else about him. I think someone might be following me, she said, trying to keep her voice casual. Probably nothing, but there have been some odd coincidences. Ji-hoon's eyes lifted from his tablet immediately, all his attention suddenly focused on her with laser intensity. What kind of coincidences? She described the barista's questions, the repeated car sightings, the feeling of surveillance. As she spoke, his expression went carefully blank in the way she had learned meant he was furiously processing information and making rapid decisions. Show me the car, he said, setting aside his tablet. Alma pulled up photos on her phone. She had started documenting the sightings, some instinct telling her to gather evidence. Ji-hoon studied the images, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He made a single phone call, speaking rapid Korean in a tone that made her glad she could not understand the words. When he ended the call, he looked at her with something dark and dangerous in his eyes. You do not leave the estate without a full security detail anymore, he said. Not for library visits, not for meetings, not for any reason. They have found you. Alma's blood ran cold. The trafficking syndicate. They never stopped looking, Ji-hoon said flatly. I eliminated their sole operations and made it clear you were under my protection. Apparently, someone decided to test whether that protection was absolute. The next morning, the envelope arrived. Alma was in her office working on thesis revisions when Mrs. Sung appeared at her door, her usually calm expression troubled. Security found this at the estate gate, the estate manager said. Mr. Park is reviewing it now. He asked that you come to his office immediately. Alma's heart hammered as she followed Mrs. Sung through the estate to Ji-hoon's private office in the main house. She found him standing by his windows, staring out at the gardens with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking Korean in short, clipped sentences that sounded like orders. On his desk lay an opened envelope and a photograph. When he finished his call, he turned to face her. His control was still in place, but she could see the fury beneath it, banked and burning. They sent a message, he said, gesturing to the photograph. Alma approached the desk, looked down at the image, and felt the world tilt. It was a photograph of her leaving the university library 3 days ago, completely unaware she was being watched. Someone had drawn a red circle around her face. Attached to the photo was a note in English, printed in cold, professional font. She is worth more to us than to you. The words hit her like a physical blow. They were declaring that they could reach her, could target her, could take her despite Ji-hoon's protection. They were challenging him directly. Ji-hoon crossed to his desk, picked up the photograph, and crushed it in his fist. His control cracked just enough to show the violence underneath, the darkness he usually kept leashed. He barked orders into his phone in Korean, his voice sharp enough to cut. What does it mean? Alma asked, though she already knew the answer. Her voice shook despite her attempt to sound calm. It means, Ji-hoon said, turning to face her with something lethal in his eyes, they are declaring war. They think they can take you to hurt me, to prove I cannot protect my people, to damage my reputation. They are wrong, but they will try. On me, Amma whispered. On anyone who thinks they can take what is mine, he corrected, and the possessive way he said mine made something clench in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. The estate transformed within hours. Armed security patrols increased from subtle to obvious. Additional guards appeared at every entrance and along the perimeter walls. Surveillance systems that Amma had not even known existed suddenly became visible, cameras tracking every angle, sensors monitoring every approach. Her movements were restricted to the main house and her suite. No more library visits, no more coffee shops, no more leaving the estate for any reason. Ji-hoon disappeared into meetings with his security team, spending hours coordinating responses and tracking down information about who had sent the photograph and how they planned to move. Amma caught glimpses of him in hallways, always on the phone, always focused, the weight of protecting her settling over him like armor. 3 days into the lockdown, Amma was going slowly insane. She paced her office, unable to concentrate on thesis work, feeling the walls close in despite the luxury surrounding her. She was safe but trapped, protected but suffocated, grateful but frustrated. She missed her independence, her freedom to move through the world without fear or guards or restrictions. She found Ji-hoon in the estate library late one evening, sitting in a leather chair with a glass of whiskey, dark circles under his eyes, looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. He barely sleeps, Mrs. Sung had told her quietly. He is personally coordinating everything. You look terrible, Amma said from the doorway. Ji-hoon's eyes lifted to her face, a ghost of amusement flickering across his tired features. Thank you for your honesty. She crossed to the chair opposite him, sat down without being invited. When was the last time you slept more than 3 hours? Sleep is a luxury I cannot afford when someone is threatening you, he said simply, taking a sip of whiskey. Why do you care this much? Amma asked suddenly. The question burst out before she could stop it, weeks of confusion and growing feelings demanding answers. You have bodyguards, security teams, people whose job it is to handle threats. Why are you personally involved? Why do you barely sleep? Why does my safety consume you? Ji-hoon set down his glass with careful precision. We have discussed this. You remind me of my brother. You are under my protection. That makes you my responsibility. That is not the whole truth, Amma pressed, leaning forward. I see how you look at me, Ji-hoon. I see how you watch me when you think I am not paying attention. This is not just about your brother anymore. This is something else. The air between them went taut, charged with weeks of unspoken tension and careful distance that was becoming harder to maintain. You do not know what you are asking, Ji-hoon said, his voice low and strained. Then tell me, Amma demanded. Tell me the truth. Why does the thought of someone taking me make you look like you want to burn the world down? Because, he said, his control finally cracking, when I look at you I see someone who shared her umbrella with a stranger expecting nothing in return. Someone who has integrity in a world where everyone has a price. Someone who challenges me and makes me remember I am human, not just a weapon. Because somewhere between protecting you and working with you and talking to you on that terrace, you stopped being just a responsibility and became someone I cannot imagine losing. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and changing everything. Amma stood, crossed the space between them, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. I am not asking you to imagine losing me, she said softly. I am asking you to stop pretending you feel nothing. Amma, he said, voice rough with warning. Do not. Do not what? She whispered, standing directly in front of him now. Do not make me want something I cannot have. Who says you cannot have it? She breathed, reaching out to touch his face. The last thread of his control snapped. Ji-hoon stood in one fluid motion, pulled her against him, and kissed her with weeks of desperate restraint finally breaking. His hand tangled in her braids, his other arm wrapped around her waist, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Amma's fingers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, surrendering to what had been building between them since that rainstorm. The kiss was intense, consuming, all the careful distance they had maintained burning away in seconds. He kissed her like a man drowning who had finally found air. She kissed him back like someone who had been waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ji-hoon rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, he said, voice rough. Everything was already complicated, Alma responded, her hands still fisted in his shirt. What is one more complication? He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense, and Alma felt something shift and settle in her chest. This was not just protection anymore. This was not just gratitude or obligation. This was something real and terrifying and absolutely inevitable. But morning brought reality crashing back. Alma woke in her own bed, having eventually left Ji-hoon in the library with one more kiss that promised continuation. She got ready for the day, expecting to find him at breakfast, expecting to navigate whatever this new dynamic meant for their relationship. Instead, she found him in his office, back in full control, professional distance reinstated like armor. "We need to talk," she said from the doorway. "Yes," he agreed, not looking up from his computer. Last night should not have happened. The words hit her like cold water. "Excuse me?" Ji-hoon finally looked at her, his expression carefully neutral. "I am your employer. You are in my protection. The power dynamic is inappropriate. I took advantage of a situation where you have limited options." Alma felt anger flare hot in her chest. "I am not some helpless victim you are taking advantage of," she said sharply. "I chose to kiss you. I know exactly what I am doing." "You are choosing from limited options," he countered. "That is not real choice. You depend on me for housing, safety, income, thesis support. Anything that happens between us is compromised by that dependence." "You think I am confused," she said, voice rising. "You think I do not understand my own feelings?" "I think," he said carefully, "that your safety is more important than my feelings. And right now, staying professional keeps you safer." "How?" she demanded, crossing her arms. "Explain to me how pretending last night did not happen makes me safer." "Because," he admitted, his control slipping just enough to show pain underneath, "if they realize you are not just my employee, but someone I care about personally, you become an even bigger target. Right now they think taking you hurts my reputation and business interests. If they know taking you would destroy me, they will move heaven and earth to make it happen." The logic was sound, and Alma hated it. She hated that he was right, that their feelings for each other painted a target on her back, that caring about him made her vulnerable in ways employment never would. "So what?" she said quietly. "We just pretend nothing happened? Go back to professional distance?" "For now," Ji-hoon said, and she could see the cost of the words in his eyes. "Until the threat is eliminated. Until you are safe. Then we can revisit what this is between us." Before Alma could respond, his phone rang. He answered in Korean, his expression going hard and cold. When he ended the call, he looked at her with something close to fear. "They are moving," he said. "Intelligence indicates the syndicate is planning something within the next 48 hours. They have brought in outside contractors. Professional kidnappers." Alma felt ice slide down her spine. "What do we do?" "You stay in the estate," Ji-hoon said, already moving toward the door. "You follow every security protocol exactly. And you trust me to handle this." That afternoon, while Ji-hoon was in the city meeting with contacts and coordinating security responses, the attack came. Alma was in her suite, trying to focus on thesis revisions and failing, her mind spinning with Ji-hoon's words and the knowledge that professional killers were planning to take her. The estate felt simultaneously like a fortress and a cage, protection and prison. Then the power cut. Not a flicker or a brownout. A complete, instant severance that plunged the estate into silence before backup generators kicked in seconds later. But those seconds were enough. Professional. Deliberate. A test of defenses. Alma stood frozen in her office, heart hammering, as emergency lighting activated. She heard voices shouting in Korean, footers running, the sharp bark of commands that meant security was mobilizing. Then she heard gunfire. Not close, but not far enough. Sharp cracks that echoed through the estate, the unmistakable sound of violence arriving. Alma's training kicked in, the protocols Ji-hoon had insisted she learn. She locked her suite door, moved to the safe room hidden in her closet, a reinforced space with communication equipment and supplies. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed Ji-hoon's direct line. He answered before the first ring finished. "Where are you?" he demanded, and she could hear car engine roaring, tires squealing, absolute urgency. "Safe room," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. There was gunfire. The power was cut. "They are in the estate." "How many?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. I heard security engaging. At least 3, I think. Stay exactly where you are, Ji-hoon commanded, his voice hard as steel. Do not come out for anyone but me. Promise me, Amma. I promise, she whispered. I am 10 minutes away, he said. The security team knows you are their priority. They will keep you safe until I arrive. Do not be afraid. But she was afraid. Not for herself, she realized with sudden clarity, but for him rushing into danger. For the security team fighting to protect her. For what Ji-hoon would do to the people who had dared breach his walls and threaten what was his. The line stayed open. She could hear him giving orders to his driver, making calls, coordinating response with lethal efficiency. She sat in the darkness of the safe room and listened to him orchestrate violence she could not see. Time became elastic. Minutes felt like hours. She heard more gunfire, sharp and close enough to make her flinch. She heard shouting. She heard the sound of something heavy falling, impact and chaos that her imagination filled with terrible possibilities. Then silence. Heavy, oppressive silence that was somehow worse than the noise. Footsteps approached her safe room. Steady, deliberate, and her heart stopped because she could not tell if they were friend or enemy. Amma, a voice called. It is me. Open the door. She recognized Ji-hoon's voice, unlocked the heavy door with shaking hands. He stood in her closet, suit rumpled, a small cut on his left cheekbone, dark eyes burning with intensity that took her breath away. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of security team members, weapons still drawn, alert and dangerous. Are you hurt? Ji-hoon demanded, his hands immediately on her face, tilting it to check for injuries, his touch gentle despite the violence radiating from him. I am fine, Amma breathed. You are bleeding. It is nothing, he dismissed, but she could see the fury in every line of his body, the barely controlled rage of someone whose protection had been challenged and violated. The attackers, she asked. 2 captured alive, he said flatly. 1 eliminated during breach. Security handled it before I arrived. The ones we captured are talking now. By morning, I will know everyone involved in planning this attack. Everyone who thought they could touch you. She saw it then, truly saw the darkness he usually kept hidden. The cold calculation of someone who would eliminate threats without hesitation. The violence that had always been there beneath expensive suits and controlled courtesy. The danger that was not theoretical, but absolutely real. You are going to kill them, she said. Not a question. Yes, he admitted, meeting her eyes without flinching. Does that frighten you? Amma thought of the men who had followed her months ago, the photograph with the red circle, the gunfire that had echoed through her home tonight. She thought of Ji-hoon's brother who had died because protection came too late. She thought of the women who had disappeared before Ji-hoon intervened in her life. No, she said, her voice clear and certain. It does not frighten me. That frightens me a little about myself. But your violence does not. Something shifted in his expression, the darkness mixing with something else. Relief. Recognition. Acceptance. Good, he breathed. Because I need you to understand who I am. I am not just a CEO, Amma. I control networks that operate in shadows. I eliminate threats permanently. I protect what is mine with everything I have, legal and otherwise. If you stay with me, you need to know the darkness you are accepting. She stepped closer, reached up to touch the cut on his cheek with gentle fingers. I know exactly who you are, Park Ji-hoon. I have known for weeks. You are a man who lost his brother and refuses to fail again. You are someone who built an empire to have power to protect people. You are dangerous and kind and broken and devoted. And I am choosing you anyway. All of you. Including the parts that eliminate threats and orchestrate violence from car rides across Seoul. His control shattered completely. He pulled her against him, kissed her with desperate relief and possessive intensity, his hands in her hair, holding her like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows and blood. You are mine, he said against her lips, not asking. I am yours, Amma agreed. And you are mine, broken pieces and all. Forever, Ji-hoon promised, and she knew he meant it absolutely. They did not leave his private quarters that night, the estate in lockdown, security teams sweeping for any remaining threats, while Ji-hoon held Ma close and promised violence against anyone who had dared come after her. Later, tangled together in his bed, she asked the question that had been weighing on her. What happens now? Now, he said, his hand tracing patterns on her skin, I finish this. I eliminate every person who thought they could touch you. I make it clear across Seoul and beyond that you are under Park Ji-hoon's permanent protection. I send a message so absolute that no one will ever risk approaching you again." He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers in the dim light. "And then I convince you to stay. Not as an employee, not as someone I protect out of obligation, but as my partner. In everything. I am not going anywhere," Alma murmured, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "You might change your mind when you see what I am capable of." "I have already seen it," she countered. "Tonight you rushed into danger for me. You coordinate violence with the same efficiency you bring to boardrooms. You protect with absolute ruthlessness. That is what I will remember. Not the darkness, but the fact that you use it to shield people who cannot shield themselves." Ji-hoon kissed her softly, something like wonder in his expression. "How did you become this?" he asked quietly. "This strong, this accepting, this perfect for someone as damaged as me." "I shared my umbrella with a stranger in the rain," she said with a small smile. "Everything else just followed from that choice." They fell asleep together as security teams patrolled outside. As somewhere in the city, Ji-hoon's networks began systematically dismantling the syndicate that had dared target Alma. As the world continued spinning, but inside that room, in that moment, there was only safety and certainty and the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of controlled violence that Alma witnessed only in fragments. Ji-hoon became something else during those 2 days. The polished CEO disappeared, replaced by someone harder, colder, absolutely ruthless. He moved through the estate with lethal purpose, phone constantly at his ear, giving orders in Korean that made his security team snap to attention with military precision. He slept perhaps 4 hours total, ate only when Mrs. Sung forced food in front of him, and his dark eyes burned with singular focus. Alma watched from the periphery as he orchestrated the dismantling of an entire criminal network with the same efficiency he brought to corporate acquisitions. She saw him in his office surrounded by security monitors and intelligence reports, tracking movements across Seoul like a general commanding troops. She heard fragments of conversations, his voice cold and final as he coordinated responses to threats she could only imagine. The 2 captured attackers were taken somewhere off the estate. Ji-hoon did not tell her where, and she did not ask. When he returned from questioning them, there was something dark in his eyes and a faint metallic scent clinging to his clothes that made her stomach clench. But she did not flinch, did not look away, did not judge. By the second evening, Ji-hoon came to her suite looking like he had aged years and days. He was still in his suit, but it was rumpled now, tie loosened, dark stubble shadowing his jaw, exhaustion written in every line of his body. But there was also satisfaction, grim and absolute. "It is done," he said simply, closing the door behind him and leaning against it like he might collapse without the support. Alma stood from her desk, crossed to him, took his hand, and led him to the sofa. She sat beside him, waiting for him to speak when he was ready. "The trafficking syndicate Seoul operations are completely dismantled," he said after a long moment. "Leadership has been eliminated or scattered. Their financial networks have been frozen and seized. Every person who knew your name, your face, your location has been dealt with. Your identity has been distributed across all relevant channels with explicit message. Untouchable under Park family protection. No one will risk coming near you. Not in Seoul. Not anywhere." He looked at her with eyes that held too much darkness. "I cannot give you specific details. You should not know specifics. But I need you to understand that the threat is permanently gone. Not paused. Not reduced. Gone." "How many people?" Alma started, then stopped. "Do not ask questions you do not want answers to," Ji-hoon advised gently. "Some things are better left in shadows where they belong." She nodded, accepting the boundary. She understood that parts of his world would always remain hidden, that complete transparency would require her to carry knowledge that served no purpose except to burden her conscience. "Did you?" she asked instead. "Were you there when?" "Some of it," he admitted. "Not all. I have people who handle certain aspects. But yes, I was present for parts of it. I needed them to understand that threatening you was not a business calculation, but a personal offense. That required my direct involvement." Alma reached up, touched his face, made him look at her. "I am not horrified," she said clearly. "I am not going to fall apart or judge you or pretend I do not know what you are capable of. You did what was necessary to protect me and ensure no one else tries. I understand that. I accept that. I accept you. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her close, buried his face in her neck, and just held her. She felt the tension drain from his body, the control he had maintained for 2 days finally releasing because she had given him permission to be exactly who he was. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped together on the sofa while evening deepened into night outside the windows. You should be afraid of me, Ji-hoon said eventually, his voice muffled against her shoulder. I just orchestrated the deaths of at least a dozen people. I did it without hesitation or remorse. That should terrify you. It should, Amma agreed. But it does not. Do you want to know what I think about when I remember the past 2 days? Tell me. I think about how you barely slept because you were personally ensuring my safety. How you coordinated everything yourself rather than delegating because you refused to trust anyone else with my protection. How you came to me looking exhausted and broken, but still made sure I knew the threat was gone before you allowed yourself to rest. That is what I will remember, Ji-hoon. Not the violence, but the devotion behind it. He lifted his head, looked at her with something close to disbelief. How are you real? He asked quietly. How did someone like you end up in my world? I shared my umbrella with a stranger, she reminded him with a small smile. That stranger turned out to be you. Everything else followed from that. Best umbrella I ever stood under, he murmured, and kissed her with a tenderness that contrasted starkly with the violence he had orchestrated over the past 2 days. 3 days after the attack, when life at the estate had returned to something approaching normal, Ji-hoon asked Amma to dinner. Not their usual informal meals in the estate dining room, but a formal invitation delivered by Mrs. Sung with instructions to wear something elegant. Amma dressed in one of the beautiful gowns from her wardrobe, a deep emerald silk that complemented her skin tone and made her feel sophisticated and powerful. She took extra care with her appearance, braiding her hair into an intricate updo, applying makeup with precision. Something about the formality of the invitation suggested this was important. When she arrived at the dining room, she found it transformed. Candles everywhere, creating warm, intimate lighting. The long table had been replaced with a smaller round table set for 2. Traditional Korean dishes were arranged alongside Ghanaian favorites, the careful blend of their 2 worlds. Soft music played from hidden speakers. It was romantic and deliberate and made her heart race. Ji-hoon stood by the windows, wearing a dark suit that fit him like it had been created specifically for his body, which it probably had. He turned when she entered, and something shifted in his expression, his controlled mask slipping to show pure appreciation. You are beautiful, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself, Amma replied, suddenly nervous despite everything they had already shared. He pulled out her chair, waited until she was seated before taking his own seat across from her. Staff served the first course with perfect timing and then discreetly disappeared, leaving them alone. What is the occasion? Amma asked, tasting soup that was perfectly seasoned. Something I should have done properly before I kissed you, Ji-hoon replied. Something I should have asked before you became so integrated into my life that I cannot imagine it without you. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They ate slowly, conversation flowing naturally between them. He asked about her thesis progress, genuinely interested in her research findings. She asked about his business expansion plans, offering insights he had come to value and rely on. They talked about his mother who wanted to meet Amma properly, about her family in Accra who deserved to know the truth about her situation, about the future that was taking shape between them. Over coffee, Ji-hoon set down his cup with careful precision. Amma Mensa, he began, his voice formal but his eyes warm. You came to Seoul as a student seeking knowledge and opportunity. You ended up saving someone who had forgotten what kindness looked like, what simple human decency meant. He stood, came around the table, and knelt beside her chair. Amma's breath caught. You have become essential to my work, my life, my ability to remember I am human and not just a weapon in an expensive suit, he continued. You challenge me. You see past the power to the person underneath. You accept my darkness without flinching and remind me of light I thought I had lost. You are brilliant and brave and kind in a world that punishes kindness. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, opened it to reveal a ring that made her gasp. Simple but exquisite, a single perfect diamond set in platinum, elegant and understated and clearly worth a fortune. I want you to stay, he said. Not as an employee, not as someone I protect out of obligation or guilt, but as my partner in everything. My wife. Let me provide for you, protect you, love you for the rest of our lives. Marry me, Alma. Make this permanent. Alma stared at the ring, at him kneeling beside her, looking simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, at the future he was offering. Her mind spun with logic and caution and all the reasonable objections. This is insane, she whispered. We have known each other less than 4 months. And in those 4 months, Ji-hoon countered, I have seen your intelligence when you challenge my business assumptions. Your courage when you face threats without breaking. Your integrity when you refuse to compromise your values despite pressure. Your compassion when you accept my worst parts without judgment. I know exactly who you are, Alma. The question is whether you know who I am well enough to choose this. She looked at him, really looked. At the man who had sent help within minutes of her terrified call. Who had investigated threats before she even knew they existed. Who had orchestrated violence to ensure her safety. Who had revealed his darkest parts and trusted her not to run. Who had lost his brother and refused to fail again. Do you know who I am? She asked quietly. A woman who shared her umbrella with a stranger expecting nothing in return, he said. Someone who sees struggling people and helps without calculating advantage. A brilliant researcher who refuses to take shortcuts. A person who looked at my darkness and chose to stand beside me anyway. Someone I love completely. The word love hit her like sunlight breaking through clouds. He had never said it before. Had implied it, shown it, demonstrated it through actions, but never spoken it directly. You love me, she said. Desperately, he admitted. Completely. In ways that probably violate multiple professional boundaries and definitely complicate our working relationship. But yes, Alma, I love you. She felt tears prick her eyes. I went to Seoul as a broke student counting my last dollars, she said slowly. Scared and alone and watching my dreams crumble. I found safety when you responded to my call. Found purpose when you valued my work. Found home when you shared your truth about Minjun. Found love when I stopped fighting what I felt for you. She touched his face gently, traced the sharp line of his jaw. You are not just a protector to me, she continued. You are someone who sees me as an equal despite the power differential, who respects my intelligence and values my perspective, who makes me feel safe without making me feel helpless. You are dangerous and devoted, and exactly what I did not know I needed. Tears were flowing freely now. Yes, she said clearly. I will marry you. I choose you, Ji-hoon. All of you. The CEO and the shadow operator. The man who builds empires and the man who eliminates threats. The broken pieces and the devoted heart. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, the only sign of how much her answer mattered. Then he stood, pulled her up with him, and kissed her with relief and joy and possessive certainty. You are mine, he breathed against her lips. I am yours, she agreed. And you are mine. Forever, he promised. I will protect you, provide for you, love you until my last breath. You will never be alone or afraid or struggling again. Everything I have built, every bit of power I possess, it is all in service of keeping you safe and happy. Alma kissed him again, tasting salt from her tears and feeling something settle deep in her chest. A sense of rightness, of having found exactly where she belonged despite the unconventional path that had led her here. They did not leave his quarters that night. They talked about the future, about integrating their lives completely, about her family meeting his mother, about the wedding they would plan. They made love with the certainty of people who had claimed each other absolutely and the tenderness of people who understood exactly what they were choosing. In the darkness before dawn, Alma lay against Ji-hoon's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, the ring heavy and perfect on her finger. No regrets, he asked quietly. Not one, she replied. You? Only that I did not see you in that rain sooner, he said. That you had to struggle and suffer before I could offer protection. But no regrets about this, about us. This is the best decision I have ever made. Second best, she corrected with a smile he could not see but probably felt. Oh, he asked, amusement in his voice. Best decision you ever made was stopping in that rain instead of getting in your car immediately, she said. Everything good followed from that. He laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine and rare. You are right, he agreed. Best decision of my life was standing in the rain long enough for you to notice I needed help. Everything else, all of this, It started with your kindness and my willingness to accept it. They fell asleep tangled together, the ring catching faint light from the city beyond the windows. Both of them finally, completely certain of what they meant to each other and the future they would build together. The weeks following their engagement moved with the same efficient precision that characterized everything Jihoon did, but with an underlying warmth that was entirely new. 3 days after Amma accepted his proposal, Jihoon presented her with legal documents that took her breath away in a completely different way than the ring had. A trust fund established in her name, completely separate from his assets, containing enough money to support her comfortably for the rest of her life regardless of their relationship status. She stared at the papers spread across his desk, her name on accounts that held amounts with too many zeros to process. "What is this?" she asked. "Your independence," Jihoon replied simply. "I need you to know that staying with me is always a choice, not a necessity. You will never be trapped by financial dependence or lack of options. If you decide tomorrow that you want to leave, want something different, you have complete freedom to do so." "I am not going to leave," Amma protested. "I know," he said, his dark eyes holding hers. "But I need you to know you could. That is the difference between protection and possession. You choose to be here. Every day, you choose. That matters to me more than any contract or legal binding." He also arranged her visa situation with the same efficiency, this time through completely legitimate channels. Park Industries formally sponsored her work visa with proper documentation and government approval. Her status in Seoul transformed from expired student hiding in shadows to properly documented professional with every legal right to remain. "You are completely legal now," Jihoon told her as he handed over the official visa documents. "No more looking over your shoulder. No more fear of discovery. You belong here as much as anyone." Meeting Jihoon's mother happened on a Saturday afternoon at a traditional tea house his family had frequented for 3 generations. Amma dressed carefully in one of her elegant business suits, her braids styled immaculately, trying to calm the nervousness that made her hands shake. "My mother does not intimidate easily and does not suffer fools," Jihoon warned her on the drive. "But she values honesty above all else. Be yourself. That will be enough." Park's son, he was a striking woman in her early 60s, elegant in traditional Korean dress, with sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing, and an air of quiet authority that explained exactly where her son had learned his commanding presence. She studied Amma with the same assessing intensity Jihoon used when evaluating business deals. They sat for tea, the ritual formal and precise. "Son," he poured with practiced grace, handed Amma a cup, and spoke in careful English. "My son has never brought anyone to meet me before," she said. "You must be extraordinary." "I am just someone who shared an umbrella," Amma replied honestly. Everything else followed from that small choice. Something shifted in Sun Hee's expression, approval flickering across her controlled features. "Jihoon told me that story. He also told me you accepted his darkness without judgment. That you understand what my family is and what my son does to protect what matters to him." "I understand," Amma confirmed. "I accept it. I love him because of who he is, not despite it." Sun Hee was quiet for a long moment, studying Amma's face like she was reading a book written in careful script. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "This belonged to my mother," Sun Hee said, opening the box to reveal a stunning jade bracelet, the green stone perfectly carved and set in delicate gold. "She gave it to me when I married Jihoon's father. I give it to you now as welcome to our family." Amma felt tears prick her eyes as Sun Hee fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "I will treasure it," she promised. "Protect each other," Sun Hee said quietly. "Jihoon will shield you from the world with everything he has. You must shield him from himself, from the darkness that could consume him if he forgets there is light. That is your role. Can you do that?" "I can," Amma said with certainty. "I will." Sun Hee smiled then, the expression transforming her face into warmth. "Good. Then you have my blessing and my support. Welcome to the Park family, daughter." For months after accepting Jihoon's proposal, Amma defended her thesis before her academic committee at the university. Her research on Korean-African business partnerships had become genuinely groundbreaking, with unprecedented access to real corporate data that Jihoon had provided while ensuring she maintained complete academic integrity. Every conclusion was hers. Every analysis was authentic. The data was privileged, but the scholarship was entirely her own. Ji-hoon sat in the back of the defense room, having quietly slipped in after the proceedings began. Amma saw him there, impeccable as always in a dark suit, and felt strength flow through her. She had earned this moment, had worked for years to reach this point. The research was excellent because she was excellent, not because of who she was marrying. The committee asked challenging questions. Amma answered with confidence and precision, defending her methodology and conclusions with the expertise she had genuinely developed. When they dismissed her to deliberate, she walked out with her head high. Ji-hoon met her in the hallway, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes proud. "You were brilliant in there," he said quietly. "Watching you defend your research, seeing your expertise and confidence, I have never been more proud of anyone." 15 minutes later, the committee called her back. "Congratulations, Dr. Mensah," the chair said with a warm smile. "Your thesis is accepted with highest honors. Your research represents a significant contribution to the field of international business and cross-cultural partnerships." Amma felt tears of joy and relief and accomplishment. She had done it, had completed her degree despite everything that had tried to stop her, had earned her doctorate through genuine scholarship and hard work. Ji-hoon was waiting when she emerged, and the look on his face was worth everything. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, and whispered congratulations that held absolute sincerity. "You did this," he said firmly. "Your work, your research, your intelligence. I am honored to have supported you. But this achievement is entirely yours, Dr. Mensah." The wedding happened 6 months after their engagement, a carefully orchestrated blend of Korean and Ghanaian traditions that honored both their heritages. Amma's family flew in from Accra, her mother weeping with joy when she saw the estate and understood that her daughter had found not just safety, but genuine love. Her father, a quiet man who taught mathematics, took one look at Ji-hoon and saw past the wealth to the devotion underneath. "You make my daughter happy," he said simply in their first meeting. "That is all that matters to me." The ceremony itself was beautiful. Traditional Korean elements blended seamlessly with Ghanaian customs. Amma wore a stunning white gown with Kent cloth accents woven into the train, her braids adorned with gold accessories her grandmother had sent from Ghana. Ji-hoon wore traditional Korean hanbok for the ceremony, the deep blue and gold making him look both regal and impossibly handsome. When they exchanged vows, Amma promised to remind him of his humanity and shield him from his own darkness. Ji-hoon promised to protect her dreams and ensure she always had freedom to choose her own path. Both knew these were not just romantic words, but actual commitments born from who they were and what they had overcome together. Seoul's elite attended alongside Amma's family, watching this unexpected union with fascination and respect. Sunhee sat in the front row, the jade bracelet visible on Amma's wrist, approval evident in her expression. Professor Kim attended as well, beaming with pride at seeing his former struggling student, now Dr. Mensah, marrying into one of Seoul's most powerful families. The reception was elegant and joyful, Korean and Ghanaian music blending as cultures mixed and celebrated. Ji-hoon danced with his new wife, held her close, and whispered that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. 6 months after the wedding, Amma sat in her office at Park Industries headquarters. Her official title was Director of African Market Development, but her real role was Ji-hoon's partner in both business and life. She reviewed proposals for educational programs in West Africa when Ji-hoon entered with an expression that made her look up immediately. "Come with me," he said. "There is something I want to show you." She followed him to the executive conference room where the board was assembled. Ji-hoon gestured for her to sit beside him at the head of the table. "I am announcing a new initiative today," he said to the assembled executives. "A comprehensive scholarship program for African students studying in Seoul, including full tuition, housing, security, and support services. Students will never have to choose between their education and their safety. They will never be vulnerable to exploitation because they are isolated and struggling." He pulled up a presentation showing the full scope of the program. Millions in funding, dedicated support staff, partnerships with universities, housing and secure facilities. Everything Amma had needed and more. "The program will be named the Park Min-joon Scholarship Fund," Ji-hoon continued, his voice steady, but his eyes holding old grief and new purpose. In honor of my brother who died too young, and in service to students who deserve the chance to pursue their dreams without fear. Amma felt tears streaming down her face. She reached for Ji-hoon's hand under the table, squeezed it tight. He had turned his loss into protection for others, had taken the pain of failing his brother and transformed it into systematic support for vulnerable students. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "This is because of you," he corrected quietly. "You showed me that one person's kindness can change everything. Now we extend that kindness to everyone who needs it." That evening, they stood together on the estate terrace where they had first really talked, where Ji-hoon had revealed the truth about Min-jun, where their relationship had shifted from professional to personal. "Remember when you found me here?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "I remember you told me about your brother," Amma said, leaning into his warmth. "I remember realizing you were not just powerful, but human." "Do you regret it?" Ji-hoon asked. "Sharing that umbrella with a stranger?" "Everything that followed." "Never," Amma said firmly. "Best decision I ever made." She thought about the terrified student she had been, counting dollars in a cramped hostel, watching her dreams crumble. She thought about the man in expensive shoes getting drenched in the rain, too focused on his phone call to seek shelter. She thought about the moment she had made a simple choice to be kind, expecting nothing in return. That choice had changed everything. "I went to Seoul as a broke student with $800 and 7 days until homelessness," she said quietly. "Scared, alone, vulnerable to people who saw me as commodity. I found you. Found safety when you responded to my call. Found purpose when you valued my expertise. Found love when I stopped fighting what I felt. Found home in a place I never expected. And I," Ji-hoon said, holding her closer, "found someone who reminded me there is light even in darkness. That empires built on loss can become forces for protection. That sharing an umbrella in the rain can change absolutely everything." Seoul spread below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, a city that had witnessed their unlikely love story unfold. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, students would soon benefit from the Min-jun scholarship, would find safety and support because Ji-hoon had failed his brother but refused to fail anyone else. The jade bracelet caught the light on Amma's wrist. The ring sparkled on her finger, and the man beside her, dangerous and devoted and entirely hers, held her like she was the most precious thing in his carefully controlled world. Because she was. Dr. Amma Mensa had shared her umbrella with a stranger in the rain. Park Ji-hoon had noticed her kindness and built a future around protecting it. Together, they had turned an impossible situation into an extraordinary love, and now they would spend the rest of their lives ensuring others had the chances they had fought so hard to claim. The rain that had brought them together was long gone, but the shelter they had created for each other, and now for countless others, would last forever.